Good evening, everybody. Is the live stream running? Can it run? Thank you. I've been given a complicated question which I didn't understand, but I think simplifying it, because everybody here, you can probably hear me without a microphone if I was in the next room, but everybody here, and if you can't hear at any point, the loop has been switched off. So if anybody can't hear, call out and we'll see what we can do. Welcome to the first P&R of this municipal year. And the first item on the agenda is the emergency evacuation procedure. We all know here and we all know that. Are there any apologies for absence?
I believe we've got apologies from Councillor Burr.
Thank you. Anybody got any declarations of interest? No. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of March. I'll move them as the easiest way of doing that, and then have a seconder, and then we can adjust or amend or whatever else. I will move them. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Joy. Evening, Di. Well, hello for the second time in a day. Has anybody got any corrections to make to the minutes, etc.? Keane.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, really, which was page 9. We obviously had an urgent item on the agenda, which will establish a cross-party working party related to the livestock market, with a view to initial work commencing. And I was just wondering if you could tell the committee what work has commenced, given that we took that as an urgent item at the last meeting.
I don't want to, how shall I put it, leave anybody, but if you listen to that tape and you were there, various people said they were going to do things, and that list did not include me, because at the point I had half an eye, and I'm now in the wonderful position of having 1.5 eyes, so I could now read through paperwork. We have tonight got the setting up of that working party. And yes, I am more than irritated that nothing has happened since then, but it's not been within my control to do it.
Okay, I can accept that. It's just we did take it as an urgent item, and it sounds like we've saved no time whatsoever by taking that as an urgent item last time. No work has happened between that urgent item and tonight, when the working party is going to be established. And obviously I did raise a query last time about urgent items being, in my view, abused when they were not genuinely urgent. And given no work's taken place, I hope you can understand, Mr. Chairman, my frustration that that was attached to the agenda with no notice, because no work has happened, which was the reasoning behind that being an urgent item.
I can fully understand your frustration. I'd probably be frustrated if I was sitting where you are, but I have been unable to do anything about that between then and now. The person who was going to hasn't, and on that basis all we can do is move on from here onwards. And I think if you recall from previous debates, I was slightly more, let's not start off on too heavy a comment, slightly more in favour of the cattle market than you were. So I'm even more personally frustrated than you probably are. Any more amendments to the minutes? We don't really have questions on the minutes, but obviously I will take one. I've taken Councillor Duncan's, and if there's anybody else got a question, then I'm more than happy to endeavour to answer them. So they're moved and seconded. Can we have those in favour?
Done? All right, okay. I can't get it to work.
I was told we were on hands, but I can't guarantee on anything. We are on hands. Yeah, well, that's why I put my hand up. Now, that was a fair indication to everybody. We're on hands, but you're making me doubt even that now.
It's been a long time.
I believe that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. It can't be unanimous, can it? Because we've new members on here. Just a thought. So it's only whoever was here last. I didn't vote. No, I didn't vote for one. I don't. Was anybody else new to P&R? I hadn't noticed anybody else new. No, I think it's NEMCON. Urgent business, said he with an element of trepidation. Is there anybody with anything to be considered as urgent business? I have one item of urgent business that you have all been informed of, and we won't go into why that is an item of urgent business, but it's only been with me since this morning. Right. Urgent business, anybody, anything?
Could I just ask one quick thing, Mr. Chairman, which is, I know you don't want to say why this item is an urgent item, but I do think it will
No,
be...
I want to quite happy to say what it is. I'm not wanting to say why it has been delayed.
Right, okay. It's just, I hopefully speak for many members of the committee in that we were landed with three, well, I don't know if it's one document because I haven't had a chance to properly look at it, but a fairly hefty report responding to 3 consultations that I think was with us at 4:30, which is just over 2 hours ago. And it does seem, I think, quite a big ask of members for this to be landed with us. And I just wanted to ask you why this has come forward as an urgent item, given that the consultations started, I think 2 of them started in March. So it shouldn't have been a surprise to you and it shouldn't have been a surprise to us. And I'm just wondering why they're on there and why it's got to us at 4:30 on the day of the meeting when the consultations were launched by the government in March.
Thank you. I got my copy way ahead of you. I got mine at something like 11:45 at lunchtime today. So I've had no more time to worth a light to read a document of that size than you have. When we come to it, I'm going to assume that none of us have read any of it, which seems like the safest position to take. But we need to decide what we're going to do with the consultation, and people need a copy of or an email of what the consultation is. And I thought it was helpful for everybody to get a copy of it today. That's why I put out, I think it was yesterday tea time, the link, i.e. it's coming up, but I hadn't seen this lot at that point, that it's coming up. So those of you who are interested, I intend to, I think was my words, raise the subject at P&R. I got this lot midday today. You got it at 4 o'clock. Because presumably I authorised it then when I'd seen it. And I mean, I didn't read it all. I just said, yeah, that's what I'm asking for. That's what we want. And therefore, you got it then. I am proposing that we don't make any decisions on it tonight other than how we handle it.
I think, Mr. Chairman, with the greatest respect, I don't know if you're quite understanding my point, which is, why is this on the agenda in the first place? Because we knew about it in March, and I can't understand if officers knew about it and you knew about it. Who requested for this to be on the agenda this evening? Was it you? Was it an officer? Why is it here? Because we knew about this in March, and urgent items of business should only be used for something that could not have been foreseen at the time the agenda papers were issued. And clearly this consultation, what could have been foreseen and was known about, and therefore I'm asking you why yet again we have another item, this is 3 meetings in a row now, where we have an urgent item of business listed which could have been foreseen, which you could have known about as chairman, and the officers could have known about. This is not an issue about the actual contents of it, because in many ways I don't think it's controversial. However, it's the principle that urgent items of business are there for urgent items. And it seems to me, again, this seems to be, could be perceived to be being abused by items being listed where the public don't know they're going to be on there, and we don't know until very short notice that they're going to be on there. It doesn't strike me as being particularly democratic. So I'm asking you the question, who asked for it to be on there, and why wasn't it listed as a normal agenda item along with all the other paperwork?
I'm just looking, Councillor Duncan, to see if my recollection fits in with the facts. No, we haven't, but I'm pretty certain, and the officers can probably confirm, I don't think that consultation was on the forward plan. Am I correct?
That's correct, as I understand it,
That's,
Chair.
and only as I understand it, I don't think it was.
The question still stands. Who asked for it to be on the agenda as an urgent item this evening? Was it you, or was it an officer?
You're not, Councillor Duncan, you're not going to get a split between me and the officers on anything that I can avoid a split on. So I will say I did it, if that helps you, and I will say I did it if it doesn't help you. All urgent decisions as to whether it goes on the agenda are my responsibility.
Absolutely.
And if the officers haven't achieved something at any point, and if there's a big capital I and a big capital F on that point, that's my fault.
Well,
it is not the fault of the officers.
I'm not pointing the finger.
In private, I may well have a word in the corridor or over a Zoom or whatever else with the officers to say what is going on. But in here, it is not our place, in any shape or form, to be questioning who did it in terms of officers and or members, because that causes an ill feeling, as far as I'm concerned, in the council. So it's my responsibility. I'm putting it on the agenda tonight because I believe it is urgent, because maybe you can put the urgency down to the fact that it wasn't on the agenda, but it still needs to be discussed tonight because of the deadlines in it.
That's okay. I wouldn't point the finger at any one individual. I'm simply asking the question that it is not right, it's not democratic, and it's not fair and proper for an item that could have been foreseen not to be on the agenda. And this has happened now for 3 meetings in a row. This meeting, the full council meeting, and the P&R meeting before that, when we established a working party with a view to urgent action, immediate action, and that work not taking place, any work at all, until this meeting. So there's a pattern emerging, and I want to send a message to you, Mr. Chairman, that I, myself, my group, do not wish to see items as urgent business that could have been foreseen. We want the paperwork, we want to make proper decisions in line with all the information before us, so we don't find this to be an acceptable situation. I'm not pointing the finger at any one individual, but as you say, as chairman, the buck stops with you, responsibility stops with you, and I'm pleased that you've admitted that, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I am more than happy to accept the buck, carry the can. That is the responsibility of being the chair of P&R. Councillor Dockwra.
Can you explain to me how I am supposed to have a discussion on something that I saw when I turned my iPad on tonight, when I got here?
Depends what
These
subject
papers
we're
came through at 4:30.
What are we talking about? Are we
I'm
talking about
the Word documents that have come through. I think it's absolutely unreasonable that we're even to have a discussion on this. This should be moved to the next P&R meeting.
It should be. Yes, I think that's a brilliant idea.
We don't discuss it tonight. It goes on the agenda
Okay.
properly at the next meeting.
That's fine. How do we achieve a P&R meeting by next Wednesday?
I understand this has been out since March, so surely it should have been on the agenda. We'd had the papers in time.
That's gone. I have said that it wasn't on the agenda tonight, and my options were to ignore it completely, I suppose, not do it at all, which I would have thought was irresponsible of a council, to give you as much notice as I could that I was getting it on the agenda. I have told Councillor Duncan that I will endeavour not to discuss it tonight and find a way round, but so that we can put a response in by I think the first one is the 4th of June. But if we didn't bring it to tonight's meeting, that wouldn't have been possible. So if you're saying you don't want to contribute to it at all, because we've got it late, that's fine.
That's
if you're
absolutely
saying,
unfair.
Hang on, let me finish, please. If you're saying you do want to contribute to it, I've done everything I can to give you a chance to contribute to it.
To suggest for 1 second that I don't want to contribute. Of course, they are important issues, and of course, as a council, we should be responding.
Good.
But I want to make an informed and balanced
Yes.
decision on it.
Yes,
I don't
so
want
do
to
I.
do it rushed on something that arrived that I've opened tonight.
I'm not going to be rushed at all, anyway. Anything further? No? Right. Sorry, didn't see you. I'm looking into the light behind you, so...
No, I was a bit late anyway, John.
Did you want to second it? Did you want to second the minutes?
No,
Oh,
I
that's
didn't.
all right.
I want to talk about what we're going to do with this. Because I
It
would
comes
like...
up later in the agenda.
Pardon?
I'm putting it on as an urgent item to come up
Is it
as...
coming on later? But
It's going to come up as item 13 under urgent business. Thank you.
Sorry, just to interrupt. Could it possibly go before then, while we're not in exempt?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, all our business will,
Yeah.
all the business will move forward so that the exempt stuff comes at the end. Policy and resources forward plan. Has anybody got anything that they would like to add or consider for the forward plan? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask, is the forward plan meant to be an exhaustive list of everything which officers and yourself can foresee needs to be considered at policy and resources, or is it just a sort of ad hoc list of items, or is it meant to be everything which can be foreseen?
I suspect you know the answer to that better than me, because this is my second visit to the P&R forward plan. I think there may be a difference between what it is, what it could be, and what it should be. And on that basis, it's up to us to look at it and put onto it what we want. It can't be an exhaustive list by definition, but I believe, and I don't know whether I've got support in it, I do believe it should include all those things that Council has agreed in the past that it will do and is going to do and whatever. So if it says something's going to happen twice a year, then and go to P&R twice a year, then it's my belief that it should be on the forward plan for twice a year. I think that's as much as I can help you. It is a management steerage tool, not an absolute rigid line that the world sticks to.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and obviously past dealings with this document, it can be quite a difficult document at times. The only reason I asked the question is there is a couple of things on here that I know we should be considering, I think, at the next meeting that aren't on here, and I'm happy to discuss that with yourself or officers outside the meeting, unless you think that we need to discuss that.
If you
now.
would like to have something considered to go on the forward plan, please tell me, because I've got some here that I would like to put on the forward plan. And if I find myself agreeing with you now when you put it, that as far as I'm concerned it can go on the forward plan unless we have a lot of opposition from the rest of the committee.
It's not something that I personally want to be on there. It's something that the committee resolve should be on there, which was in relation to the budget that was set for this year. There was an allocation, I believe, and I'm happy to be corrected, of 6 months' worth of COVID contingency funding, which added up to quite a sizable amount. And the decision was taken at the time by the committee and was referenced in the budget documents that that would be brought back to P&R to see where we were at now with COVID, what costs were expected, whether certain allocations for elements of extra staffing, for example, within the budget should continue beyond those 6 months. That's obviously quite a sizable and important item that I can't see is on here.
Can you just, for my education, tell me, is that 6 months from the 1st of April to 6 months on from then, presumably?
Yeah, well, I was trying to work this out myself because I'm not quite sure, but clearly there needs to be we need to be clear of those 6 months. So we need to make a decision before the 6 months is up.
Yes.
If we want that funding to continue, I just don't want it to be forgotten about. So I would imagine it will be the July meeting.
I'm grateful for that because I hadn't spotted that, and if that was a decision in the budget, then I will put that into the forward plan as of now. But I will discuss with officers as to how it goes in, when it goes in, because if it was a decision that we made at council, then we've got to do it. But the timing of doing that, I wouldn't inflict on anybody a date, but I will be saying, let's find out how that works. Thank you very much for that. That's useful.
Chair, just to add, the Section 151 officer is available to give advice to the meeting. I don't know if there's anything he'd want to add to that would assist you.
We could do, and it would be lovely to see and hear from Anton, but I am suggesting that that's a conversation we can have after this as to when it goes, because just to spring that on him now is just, we're not moving on. One word, Anton, yes or no? Are you happy with that?
Yes, that's fine.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, fine. No, okay, 33% accurate there. Yes, that's fine. No, never mind. Right, okay. Anything else anybody wants to go on the forward plan? Councillor Andrews?
I thought this document was really useful, actually, to sort of see it out the year planned ahead. I couldn't see anything on a biodiversity action plan, which I think is quite old now, and I wondered if there was something that could be put on the...
I've got that in my list, so there's an overlap. There's an overlap there. Anybody else got anything that they want on there? And this isn't conclusive. This is just where we are tonight, and next week somebody says, why aren't we? Answering Councillor Duncan's question, this is not the track from which you cannot move and can't do anything more or less than. If anybody wants anything else put onto the P&R agenda, ask, and we will look, and I will discuss with officers whether it's possible or not. Right. I don't apologise for the rest, because having walked into Councillor Docker's and Councillor Duncan's view of the consultation, I believe that to try and stop that happening again, that we ought to have every consultation that comes up from the government on subjects we cover, housing, waste collection, etc., must go to P&R, even if P&R says, officers do it, no, we don't want to respond, whatever. So try and avoid what's happening here happening again. So I will be proposing that that goes on as a standard item, a bit like emergency evacuation procedure, just government consultation, and if there's nothing, the minute's a minute nothing, and that's it. No time, no effort, no anything. But it does mean that when there is one, the system will look at when that comes up and when it doesn't. The next one that I'm going to put onto the forward plan is the local plan. I can't see it in here, and the dates and times of when that will be there should be there, but it's got a finish date at some point next year, and that needs slotting in so that we are in line for doing what we need to do by when. I believe, and this is only memory, Councillor Duncan may be able to help me, but I think climate change should come to P&R twice a year, and I can't see it in here. I thought that was the one that he was going to
I was going to mention that one, but I thought I'd pick the most, well, I won't say the most important one, the one that stood out that we requested as a committee, that was time sensitive, but I did also think about that.
Yeah, and it's there, and it's not this council, it's not this committee making a decision on that. Full council decided it should be. Which 2 meetings at 6 months apart we put it in there is up to workload and officers and the size of the agenda and or whatever. So with biodiversity action plan, climate change, local plan, government consultations, and the final one I've got is and this will probably only be a one-off one. No, this will be a once a year one, and that is way back in time. It was decided that the White Rose Home Improvement Agency would report to full council once a year. And I suspect people who've been here less than 5 years or whatever may not recall that being set up at all. And I see from Councillor Dockery, that's right, and I said at a meeting this afternoon, I suspect at least a third or half of our councillors don't know about it. That's problem 1. Problem 2 is that council decided that it would report. It would be reported from that agency on a once-a-year basis. None of that appears to have happened. So we can have it, and I might consider when we get nearer, and I'm looking to Claire to see if she nods or whatever, that we probably have a pre-P&R meeting where we could get a presentation from the organisation before we then get there, whatever. But that'll mean consulting with officers and how much time and can we cope with it. Yeah. But if you know nothing about something, before you make a decision, the more you can get in. Yes, so do I, which is why, I had great fun with that lot. Right, okay.
Chair, if I could just ask, appreciating that you'd said there'd be discussions with officers around how and when these additional items would be implemented and resourced, and also mentioned how we could use member briefings. I did just want to say a lot of my senior management colleagues are again available. I don't know if there's anything they'd want to add to the committee now. Chair.
I'm saying this committee decides what it wants. Councillor Duncan has given me one, and I'm very happy with that because it's in the budget. All the others, Simon, are in the system. They aren't John Clark or Councillor Duncan's dreaming ups. We should have that lot in the system. So on that basis, we will have. Of course, the timing, the workload, how it's done, etc. Of course, there'll be discussions with officers. And the one that Councillor Duncan has brought forward, I haven't got a clue when the best time to do that is. But if that's what council has decided, we better do it. Right. So I'm now going to move the adoption of the policy and resources forward plan with amendments to be made to cover government consultations, the Rydale local plan, climate change, biodiversity action plan, White Rose Home Improvement Agency, and I can't put yours into 2 words, Councillor Duncan, but the item in relation to budget for the first 6 months of COVID funding. Have we got that?
Yes, that's noted, Chair.
And is it seconded? Thank you, Di. In which case, can we vote on that, please? Those in favour? I'm not used to this "those in favour" bit.
Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Appointment of working parties and subcommittees. And this is where I carry the can again. But Councillor Duncan, probably you won't want to look too comfortable over me carrying the can on this one, because I believe you've missed it for the last 2 years that you had this. And that is, we have in this organisation, and did have for 10, 15 years or whatever, a flood management working party. I don't think it ever had the word short term in it, so that can go. Terms of reference of the flood management working party. It was chaired. I'm very pleased to see that we have the chair of it who chaired it for long enough, Councillor Cousins. And it did an awful lot of work on slow the flow, flooding, bringing people into a forum. Not what Mike Potter lovingly called a cosy fireside chat, but brought it into a proper working party that reported. Unfortunately, it was one of those things that had been there for so long that it got missed off, and I don't feel guilty. I plead guilty to an extent to this. When I asked for terms of reference, I asked Simon for terms of references, how you called meetings, all the other rule books for working parties and subcommittees, etc. I missed this one off. Councillor Duncan didn't spot that I'd missed this one off. So I'm putting this terms of reference for the flood management working party to go on the list. Councillor Duncan.
Just one quick question, Mr. Chairman, which is, you mentioned that the, what is it you're calling, Flood Management Working Party had been established for many years. Am I right in, are you talking about the Flood Liaison Group, or are you talking about a working party? Because if you're talking about a working party, as far as I know, in the time I've been on the council for 6 years, there hasn't been a working party with that title and with those terms of reference.
And that's why I corrected, and you may well be right that it was, and David will be able to tell us clearer. You are right, your naming of it rings more accurately with me, but it is still a working party. It's not a subcommittee, and then everything else is, you know, flexible compared with a subcommittee which has got proportionality rules and whatever else. What was its title, David? What was the title of that group that you, or committee or subcommittee or whatever it was called? Let's...
I think it was a flood working party, Mr. Chairman. Really, that's what it was. It was getting them all together to talk, and they would talk and do. But before we had this meeting, everybody was walking separate ways. All the different agencies were doing their own thing. But when we got them to come and meet up, they would all talk together. And we really did do a lot of good.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
What this does do is tie it in more. But let's go through them in the order and then do that one at the end when people have had a little bit more time to consider.
Would you like me to introduce the
Yes, please.
report, Chair?
I was just turning over the page and going to ask you. I thought I'd ask you when I'd found it, but keep going.
So this is an annual report that comes to Policy and Resources Committee at the start of each municipal year. Policy and Resources Committee can choose to set up a number of subcommittees and working parties. The main difference is a subcommittee has decision-making power. A working party is an advisory body and has to make recommendations back to the main committee to be considered for approval. So we're looking at reappointing the subcommittees and working parties that were in place last year, and the terms of reference for those are attached at Appendix 1, and the membership as of last year is attached at Appendix 2. I've not been notified by any groups that they wish to change the membership. Also, following on from the previous meeting of Policy and Resources, there's terms of reference attached for a livestock market working party, and most groups have given me nominees for that working party as well. I think there's just one group who needs to supply nominees for this meeting. With regards to a flood management working party, which the chair has mentioned, I think the previous group started off as the land drainage liaison group and then became the flood risk management liaison group, and it wasn't a working party of P&R previously. It was a liaison forum with other partner organisations. So Policy and Resources Committee can set up a working party to look at flood management, but that it would therefore have a different constitutional standing to the previous group. And my colleagues Becky Bennett and Margaret Wallace, who are much more familiar with the details of flood management matters and the history of the other group, are available if there are specific questions on that when we move on to those details in particular. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, that title probably were all right because it probably changed with titles. My reason for thinking it was probably best to go under P&R was I was somewhat severely lobbied by a member of council as to why wasn't it still there, what had happened to it, and why I got rid of it. And I managed to point out that I hadn't got rid of it, and then somebody else was attacked on the same basis. The meetings I went to in the past were incredibly useful. They backed and supported the Slow the Flow in Pickering with its own right, if it did nothing else was worth having. The expertise from people on the drainage board was invaluable. And I don't know whether we change the wording now or what we do, but when I looked into the Constitution and then asked the person who was, I think haranguing me would be a polite way of putting it, where is it in the Constitution? What body is this technically? I used to go to it, but what is it? And then we all found, and then I asked officers, it wasn't in the Constitution at all. It was just freestanding for a mere 10, 15 years and running along quite nicely, didn't need anything. But then it's gone, and if it's gone, it needs resurrecting. And if anybody's got any better ideas as to how it's managed and where it slots in, I for one would be delighted to hear it, because I don't think it's going to be reporting to P&R on a highly frequent basis, etc. You were on that, were you, Di?
Yes, I was, Mr. Chairman. I mean, my only slight concern about it becoming a working party is that when it was a liaison committee, there was representation on it from the County Council, Yorkshire Water and the Environment Agency. Now, if it becomes a working party of this council, obviously a working party can invite those people along, but in recent years, which is why I think it's lapsed, there seemed to be some reluctance amongst those bodies to attend. So that's my only concern, really. I think when it was the liaison committee, there was a willingness to attend. And yeah, we can talk amongst ourselves as a working party, but we need to address those responsible for flooding. So I'd like some sort of mechanism in order to invite those the flood responsible bodies along to that working party.
Anybody else anything to add to that? Councillor Duncan?
I suppose I do know that officer time and resource is quite stretched internally from Rydale at the moment, and I imagine all public authorities' time and other partner bodies as well is stretched too. So I suppose I was just wondering if you would be happy, Mr. Chairman, for perhaps Becky or Margaret to give their view as to the best way for us to optimise use of officer time and our time to ensure that, yes, we want to get action on flooding issues across the district, but what is the best way to do that? Is it a liaison group? Is it a working party? Is it member briefings? Is it maybe nothing at all, just formal reporting into committee? Because I think, I hope you can agree, we would all want to use our time wisely and the time of other people as well, because if they're invited to too many meetings or a succession of meetings, they then just refuse to turn up, and that doesn't help anybody. So one of the point I would make as well is in my time as chair of P&R, as leader of the council, there was only one member of this council, as far as I'm aware, that was dissatisfied with the fact that the flood liaison group wasn't meeting. Everybody else, including members of this council who have had a much longer and in-depth history of campaigning for flooding action, seem content with the current format and setting up. So I just want to make sure that we are doing the right thing and not just perhaps trying to please one member of council who may well have legitimately, legitimate views on this. But we don't just want to talk in short, we want something that's actually going to deliver action. So if we could get perhaps some comments from one of the officers, I would be grateful of that.
Margaret?
I mean, the reason the flood liaison group wasn't meeting before was because there was a client group that was set up with elected members on it. So Becky had obviously had resource issues, as did some of the other agencies. So, we think that through the working party, we can then get that clear kind of action plan of actually what we're trying to achieve within Rydale. So again, we can work in partnership with the authorities, as Councillor Keel said, to make sure that we're really clear as an organisation, their responsibilities, and they're clear of their responsibilities as well to Rydale. So we have been having 2 briefing and workshops that have allowed us to kind of update everybody on the work of the different agencies. And we have put together an action plan. I think councillors would agree that the action plan likely needs a wee bit more work, and there are some more focused areas that we could actually work on, but it is resource from the perspective of Rydale at this moment in time that we wouldn't be able to keep on going to the client liaison group and the flood management group and all of these other groups. So it would be good to kind of streamline them if we could going forward. I don't know if Becky wants to kind of make any comment, because Becky was involved in it before.
Yeah, I would just echo what Margaret said, and as long as we have a mechanism to share information on what's happening with the work of the flood partners, felt you like it's important that we have that mechanism, and I think as long as we have something that we regularly can for updates, and I'm sure partners would attend, that would be a good way forward for me.
Anybody else got any comments? Di?
Sorry, could I just come back on that? I think the client liaison group that is currently meeting, which is basically talking about...
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Keel. The microphone is what picks you up on a live stream, thanks.
Sorry, apologies. We've forgotten how to do it, haven't we? The client liaison group is helpful, but it's basically always talking about the current scheme and what is being delivered. And I'm not entirely sure we need to meet to do that and use valuable officer time to do that, because I think most people in the council know what the scheme is about. It's been talked about on the member briefings, and certainly in the areas where it's been delivered, I think people do know about it. So updates on that could probably come via email, I think, from mostly from the county council. And so that would save some officer capacity. But a working party that actually looked to what we're going to do next, not what we're doing at the moment, would be much more helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else? Janet?
At National Parks we have a committee, well it isn't a committee, it's just a get-together called PLUG, that's Primary Land Users Group. And it's really useful. We don't make any decisions there, but we get, all sorts of different people that are involved with land use in the national park. There's sometimes as many as 20 people go to those meetings, and it's really, really useful to just talk to people and know who's doing what and who wants to do what and who doesn't want to do what. And it helps you then in other committees or in decision making. It helps you to decide, well, we could do that, but they don't want to. And the flood liaison group do that. They get the Environment Agency, our council, county council, whoever, whatever, get them together, get them to have a talk about things and get them to decide who wants to do what and who will do what. And sometimes I think that we maybe take on as a council things that maybe Environment Agency should be doing. And I'm sure they think the same, vice versa. And so to have a group getting together and talking these things through, I think it's a really good thing. It really helps things to move on.
Joy?
Are we taking this all as one? Because I want to change some names on the committee thing, or are we still discussing
I was looking at the moment at because it's the new one, the flood management. Okay. I was hoping, but if you wish to change names, that would be fun.
Unless anybody's got anything to add on the...
No, but I was looking at this one, but it's the new one, because I was hoping that the other one were just slotting in names or whatever. I have already deleted short-term working party because the hope that flooding will only be short-term is. I'm all in favour of optimism, but I can't quite get to that level of optimism. But maybe I'm not old enough to see it as a long-term problem. Anybody else for any more on that? Well, I think we're nearly there. Terms of reference for the flood management working party, we're saying that it can be a discussion. One of the reasons that I wanted to put it onto here is because the other one was chaired by the council, and I think it's absolutely vital that the council has views on what Janet was saying in terms of what are not just our responsibilities, what are others' responsibilities. Because sewage occurs in a street in Pickering every 2 or 3 years when there is a heavy storm. And they all blame the council. Bless them. Right? And it isn't. It's Yorkshire Water. Yorkshire Water is responsible for sewage and not mixing it up with etc. Now, if you have a group here, it could on occasions recommend to the policy committee that we need to be firmer with Yorkshire Water, we need to tell Yorkshire Water, we need to whatever, which at the moment there is no setup to do it unless we have an item on the agenda which won't have had what Janet was talking about, the background discussion and whatever beforehand. The only thing that I would wonder about, trying to just pick up what we've got at the moment, the size and membership is determined by the Policy and Resources Committee. We can do that in a minute. I'm just wondering whether it should have the power to co-opt or co-opt without voting rights. Because if you have somebody from Yorkshire Water that wants to come, or wants to come regularly, or somebody from the Environment Agency or North Yorkshire, I don't think they should be only coming when invited if they're committed to doing it. Have you any thoughts on that, David? And I know you're not on here, but I don't think this is going to end up as a scrutiny crisis.
Chair, would you like me to provide a microphone for Councillor Cousins so that he can be heard on the live stream?
I think that would be
Yeah.
very, very, very kind of you. Has anybody else got any further to comment while David's been mic'd up, is the phrase? Di, you're very much alongside me. You have to sort of...
Sorry, yes, I have to wave.
Yes.
In the dim and distant, the liaison committee actually did have the power to co-opt members of the public as well, because there were representatives from flood action groups
Yes.
on that committee.
Thank
So
you,
I
I-
throw that in as well, because
Yes.
I think that's also important, because as we saw in the February flood in Norton and Moulton, there were quite a lot of people on the ground from the various agencies who actually really didn't know anything about Norton or Old Moulton and didn't really know even where they were. And I think having that public
Yes.
voice is also helpful.
So the size and membership determined by policy and resources, which we'll do next. But the group is allowed, the group may also co-opt up to a third of its membership, Di? If you have too many, it's then no longer a council thing. And do we give them voting rights or not? Not that that's happened very often on the flood liaison group, I can't remember, but the group may also co-opt people from outside council, and that covers North Yorkshire through to some expert on plumbing. Just a second. Group may also co-opt people from outside the council.
Just to recommend co-option back to P&R Chair, because it doesn't have any decision-making powers, so it could recommend back, and they'd have to be non-voting.
So may also recommend to P&R to co-opt people from outside the council. Does that make sense? And have you got that?
Yes, Chair.
Can I ask...
Claire, sorry,
Can I ask that you specifically co-opt an individual or individuals from the villages and not just the towns? Because so often they are... Obviously, there was problems in Slingsby and Frighton, and they are left out of this repeatedly. So rather than it just be people from Moulton and Norton, we do allow the other... and that's set there. That is...
Can I suggest, Claire, coming from a village,
yes,
I am 101% in support of that, but I don't think we can put it into terms of reference. But you've now said it; it's on the tape, and everybody.
Why can it not be a term of reference?
Because if you start saying into one village or another village,
no, just a
person.
All
from
I'm
anywhere.
saying is that somebody from one of the villages is more likely to have an understanding of it.
I'm in agreement with you, but that's up to the working party to get somebody there. Hang on to it, to stay with your thought. I mean, I can't think what wording, and we can ask the officers, you would put in, but it must include somebody from the villages. Then you get nobody...
Resident in the villages,
yeah,
as opposed to somebody from the towns
yes,
saying that they're representing the
I
villages.
understand that, but I don't know how you put that into a...
Can't be that hard.
Pardon?
I said it can't be that hard.
Simon, there you go. Off you go. It's not that hard. Let's hear your wording for it.
It's just that one of the co-opted members is a resident of a village that is impacted by flooding. Is that hard?
Could we add a line after the one you've already drafted, Chair, saying that the co-opted representatives include representatives from both villages and towns? That cover it to everybody's satisfaction?
I'm happy with that. I hope it works. The usual problem is getting somebody to do those things, unless you've got a Broadby and a present councillor, ex-councillor there, and then they're banging on the door to get in, But then another time you can't get anybody from Pickering, or you can't get anybody from whatever. But yes, that's covered. What have we got? Have you got an endeavour in there, or an includes, or endeavours to include? I think you need something like that. Otherwise, we'll not be carrying out its standing orders. Right, I'm going to ask David, because I've asked him to come back. Can you tell us about it, David? And where did your decisions go, and any comments?
Well, Mr. Chairman, when we had these meetings, we got all these groups to come, and we found out that they couldn't get the work done, what they had. So, what did they do? They would get the drainage board, sometimes, to do the job. And they could do it a lot quicker than what the Environment Agency or Yorkshire Water could do, that were having to come from Bradford, Leeds, or wherever they were from. And so we started, and we were, actually, was the drainage board, getting work that we could get done for them. When we were slack, we could put machines into there and do these jobs. And we were really, it made a very big difference getting them to talk again. Really did.
Thank you, David. I think we've thrashed that one fairly well. Size of the working party. Any thoughts, Dara?
It doesn't need to be huge like any other working party, and especially if we're having external people on it as well, representatives from every group.
Sorry?
A representative from every group on the council?
Yes, I'm happy with that. For the Keane and Claire, are you happy with that? Because you're the, like a double-sized group. So if you would want to, I would support that. And if you don't want to, fine.
I know we had a discussion last time about other working parties that were being established. I mean, we probably would have interest from 2 members to be part of it, but I'm happy for it to be a representative from each group. Particularly if it's just about exchanging information and getting information from various partners. What I would say is we wouldn't be in a position this evening to nominate who that person would be, because
no,
I haven't had any opportunity to discuss, and obviously it's the first I've heard about this sort of idea of establishing it. But in principle, I'm happy. The other thing I would say in terms of reference is, like the others, I think the simpler they are kept, the better.
Yes.
They all just simply say, as far as I can tell, to consider and make recommendations to P&R on aspects of flooding, and that probably would do the job, because it keeps the remit broad and the working party can decide what to do. But we're happy with that. I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to have the success that perhaps the previous group had in the past. I'm still not convinced it's necessarily the right thing to do at this point in time in terms of resources that we've got, but I'm happy to take your understanding, Councillor Clark, that this is a wise move. So happy to go with it, but we won't be able to nominate who the person is this evening, but I'm happy to let Simon know at a later stage who our nominee is.
That would be more than fine from my angle. We are either fortunate or unfortunate, depending how long he's been speaking on the subject, to have someone that if I don't put him onto this, there would be severe trouble. I think, like all things, this is probably best to see how it runs, because we can change the terms of reference, we can change the membership, we can change anything else in 6 months' time or a year's time if we're finding things that are not working with it and whatever. But at least we've got it back onto the agenda as such. Are you happy with that, Dara?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll keep referring. Are you happy with that, David? Yes. I know you've no right to be happy or unhappy on this, but as you've chaired it for a mere 10 years plus or whatever, I think it'd be rude to ignore you at an absolute minimum. Right. So can I move that we take that as amended and set up a terms of reference for the Flood Management Working Party?
Can I second that, please?
Those in favour? Those against? this isn't going to go on. I can't cope with this. Right. And
Chair, just to confirm for the benefit of the live stream that was unanimous.
Thank you, sorry. And the membership of that will be one from each group, which we've already agreed in its terms of reference, and that the membership will be given to Simon at a later point. And Simon can probably guess membership of our group, so I shan't be picking up the phone or sending him an email.
I need to bring the membership back to P&R just for ratification once
Yes,
we've
yes.
got the nominees
Yes.
from the group, so we'll put that on the next meeting.
Yeah. Right. If we're happy with all the rest, no, I'll take the rest by sort of exceptions, as it were. Is there anybody wants to ask anything or change anything on any of the others? I have one that I wish to raise, but let's get everybody else first. Has anybody got anything? Working parties, Joy. You wanted to rename something, didn't you?
No, I didn't want to rename it. I wanted to put different councillors in the positions on the local plan working party. If that's okay.
Right.
Or is that your job to do? I don't know.
No, we can nominate somebody. I don't think you can actually put them on, Joy, but
No,
it's a good start.
Sorry.
Right, what are your nominations, Joy? And so Simon can hear.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Potter, Mike Potter, for the Liberal group on the local plan working party, and Councillor Carrie Brackstone as substitute.
Right, is everybody else happy with what they've got, where they've got, or have you given them to Simon? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one minor amendment, and I understand that the person that I'm going to put forward for this is happy to do it, but I'm happy to swap it back if they aren't. Previously, Councillor Docker had been our representative, and of course, the Conservative group also had the chairmanship of Policy and Resources and the chairmanship of Planning on the local plan working party. Obviously, we no longer have those two positions, so we have the one representative. Councillor Goodrick had previously been involved with that as chairman of Planning Committee, myself as well. We've discussed as a group, and I'd like for Councillor Goodrick to be the member of that committee and for Councillor Docker to be the substitute.
Can I throw in either an olive branch or an olive that you eat that hasn't quite ripened at all, whichever, I hope it's the first. Would that be fairer if you have got neither policy nor resources nor the chair of planning, that your group has two representatives on there? Because I don't know about anybody else, but I would be quite happy. I would be quite happy with that. Yeah, it is. You're a large group, and I think just one representative, when you haven't got those two chairs, would strike me as being fair. If you want it, if you don't want it, then, you know, fine, let's leave it as it is.
I mean, I'm sure Councillor Docker would be very happy to continue serving on there alongside Councillor Goodrick, with Councillor Delaney now back as a substitute. So we want Councillor Delaney again on there, substitute. So I'm happy for that to be the case. All I would say is the local plan working party, and all the time that I was part of it, did operate by immense consensus. It did, officers and members did work very closely together. We have achieved, it doesn't feel like we've achieved very much, but we have achieved quite a bit to get to where we got to with going out to the sites document. So I'm happy with that, but I don't want people to feel as if we're sort of wrestling in on that, because we'd be happy with it being one, happy with it being two.
I'm offering the change, Councillor Duncan, so you're not wrestling in on it, and I just think it would be fairer. The only thing I think you recall is that we have had a vote on the local plan at P&R or full council a couple of months ago that was one of our usual incredibly close jobs. But apart from that, I can't see any problem with things at all. And, you know, if we lose a vote and the Conservatives win a vote, that's fine. That's what the council is about. Yeah. Yes, but a working party makes recommendations, etc., and I have no problem with that whatsoever. Die.
Yes, thank you.
See if I can shuffle back a little bit without breaking any
It's okay.
COVID rules.
I'll shout. It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah.
Right back.
Yeah. One thing I just want to say that's a correction, just for Simon, for the lists on the Livestock Working Party. It should be Liberal Democrat and Independent group, and you've just put in Liberal Democrat, and things have moved on a little bit. But my other point was, is there any, and this, I suppose this is a question to you, Simon, is there any reason why there is not a Liberal Democrat and Independent member on the Grants Working Party?
There's no reason there couldn't be a member from your group on that working party. There's no requirement for working parties to be politically proportionate. So if Policy and Resources would like to put a member on, then it's within their remit to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was the case. So.
Which one were you talking about, Dash?
The Grants Working Party.
I would have no problem with there being a Liberal Democrat on there whatsoever. It is one of the working parties in the council. Well, it makes the planning working party look like a raging political debate. I mean, I don't think in 8-10 years we've had a political hoo-ha on there at all. I don't know what's happened in the last couple of years since Joy's been. Have you been causing? No. No, so no, I've no problem with that at all, Di, whatsoever. You'll have to keep an eye on Joy because I don't know what she's been doing. Yeah.
I was
not
on
arguing
it.
how much
Yeah,
is
in the
wasted,
past.
but here.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we need to vote on that then,
No,
Simon?
I don't think so.
Can I have the names of the nominee and substitute, though, please?
I'll send them to you.
And have
That's
you
okay.
got our...
Or do you want
Sorry,
them now?
If we could have them now, we could approve them now. Otherwise, we bring them
Okay.
back to the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, so it would be myself as the member, and if you need to substitute, it would be Councillor Middleton.
Have we got the Liberal nominations for the Livestock Working Party? Have you got them?
No, I've not received those, Chair.
In which case, that's me and Mike Potter as a substitute. And I think we're closing in on this lot from a sort of circulating round angle because we haven't filled up the populated is the word, I think. We haven't populated the flood management working party. That's got to come back to Pete. You're saying we can't decide that tonight? I don't mind. I just don't want to get on business when we've got it here to.
If all the groups had got nominees, we could approve those tonight, but my understanding was that you'd want to discuss that in political groups and therefore the names would have to come back to the next meeting.
I think you may be right. Yes, okay, I'll go with that. Just trying to avoid doing the whole thing again. Right, so can we take it? I've got one question, Simon. It's the Appeals Panel Subcommittee. I thought that, is that the one that had the commentary, the chief executive on, etc.? What page is that? 31. No, it's not. No, it's not, Joe. It's not 31.
Chair, is it page 19?
I just left page 31. Yeah. No, I don't mean that. I mean the appeals, not the appointments. I mean the appeals subcommittee. What page is that on?
Page 23, Chair.
Page 30. That's livestock market is 29. And my page 30 is left blank.
The terms of reference are on 23, Chair, and the membership's on 31.
Membership is on where, Simon? 31, did you say?
Yes, page 31.
Ah, yes, you. I didn't. I almost sounded surprised. I didn't mean to sound surprised there. The appeals panel. In the absence of any of these members and substitute, the panel to consist of 3 members, 1 Conservative, 1 Independent, 1 Liberal, to be appointed by the Chief Executive in consultation with the Chairman of Policy and Resources. I don't believe that should be. The Chief Executive's got to do it mechanically, but I don't believe it should be the Chair of P&R deciding. Let's just leave it as it is to make it complicated. I don't think the Chair of P&R should decide which Liberal Democrat goes on there if the one they've got nominated doesn't. And I think there needs to be a sentence in there saying the group leaders submit if the numbers can't be made up. Is that possible, Simon?
We could add in the words to be nominated by group leaders. We'd still need to include to be appointed by the Chief Executive, because that delegation has to be to an officer. But I think in practice, we've all spoken to group leaders if a circumstance like that has arisen anyway, so it would just be documenting what we do in practice.
So why can't we, if we've got there at the moment Councillor Graham, substitute Councillor Goodrick, have a few more on that same list and just leave it as it is? In other words, the parties. The parties have decided Councillor Graham and Councillor Goodrick because they've nominated, and
you could appoint additional substitutes. That's another alternative for groups to supply further names. This is one of the subcommittees where specialist training is required for the people who sit on there ahead of meetings, but that would be another way of dealing with it.
Chair, apologies for interrupting. The Chief Executive had her hand up. I don't know if she wishes to speak.
Thank you. I was going to make the same point that Simon did, Chair, in terms of any substitute would have to be trained before they could be on that list.
I have been on one of those, and the training I got, I think, was a couple of weeks before I was required. And if that's the case, whoever goes on there can be trained. I just am concerned about the Chair of P&R deciding that somebody in another party should be doing that. I'm not going to go for great lengths on it. The question I've got for you, Simon, if you could help me, is are all the members of that panel totally equal, or does the Chair have any powers that the others don't have?
The Chair would only have the sort of usual powers associated with the Chair of any committee or subcommittee. So in terms of the running of the meeting, keeping order, in the event there was a casting vote on anything. But beyond the sort of standard powers that a Chair holds, there's nothing additional.
So no powers outside of the normal chairing powers within a meeting?
To my knowledge, there's no other powers than a chair of any committee or subcommittee would have. It obviously relates to the business that's being considered at the subcommittee, but it would be around the running of the meeting, the keeping of order, and anything to do with the votes.
Yeah. Thank you. Have we got all the nominations you want for all those now?
Yes, I think we've got nominations for all the seats on the list. Thank you, Chair.
Can we therefore take the whole shooting match in one vote? Now propose that we take the working parties, the terms of reference, the other discussions and interesting bits we've got, and thank you particularly for the village one. That was a nice, clever thought. All that lot, and the nominees from all the parties, and the substitutes. I propose that we do that. Have I got a seconder? You've been trained by Councillor Arnold, you know. Right. Those in favour?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. I think it now gets, that was just messy, it now gets more interesting, I think. Draft Rydale Housing Strategy, page 33 to 46. And this, I take it, is you, Kim.
It is. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. So this is Rydale's Draft Housing Strategy 2021 to 24. What we're asking for is a recommendation that the objectives and priorities are endorsed by Policy and Resources Committee to be presented to Council. So the objectives and proposals within the housing strategy, together with their timetable, address the priority housing issues within Rydale. People will be aware that the previous housing strategy expired in April 2021, and we need to ensure that we have plans in place for the next 3 years to inform our service provision. In addition, across North Yorkshire and York, work is nearing completion on reviewing the overarching strategic housing direction, and our local objectives need to align with the actions across the sub-region. But because the work hasn't been completed across North Yorkshire, we felt in Rydale we couldn't wait. And as long as we align to the overarching strategies and localise them, we needed to get on with our plans. So this will take Rydale the authority to March 2024. With regards to policy context, the objectives developed support the Council's plan around our community and our economy. We did quite a lot of consultation on key priorities in the strategy. We did that with the public, with stakeholders, with some of our main partners. And we have made some amendments to some of the priorities under the objectives based on this. Some of the feedback included making sure we had accommodation for the elderly, housing for younger people, people's perceived infrastructure issues with new developments, which I think members will probably be aware of the public's view with regards to places at schools, doctors, dentists, increased traffic and environmental issues. So I've put some detail on there about comments on the strategy as a whole and what people needed or what people mentioned in regards to improvements. So this replaces the previous strategy that we developed a long time ago in 2015. Which we've continued to review on an annual basis, and we've made quite a lot of progress over the 5 years, but we do want to continue to improve the services offered in housing and to the community. So in looking at the objectives over the last 3 years, it's important to recognise where we've come and what progress we've made. So I did include highlighted in Appendix A some key achievements, because sometimes I do think we forget what we've achieved, and that just highlights some of them that we've done. And I want to take this opportunity to obviously thank the team, because a lot of work has gone into that. At 6.7, I do think we need to recognise that we are working with partners at the moment to fully understand the extent of the impact on the pandemic and housing, such as how it affects rent arrears, business plans, investment capacity, The impact on the supply of new homes is unclear at this stage. What is evident is that the pandemic has highlighted the long-term issue of entrenched deprivation across some of the areas, and the historic erosion of support infrastructure and the lack of supported housing. That's what came out across North Yorkshire. And in Rydale, we don't have a lot of supported housing. So at 6.8, what I've highlighted there is the 5 key objectives, and then the priorities underneath all of those, which is obviously, this is why we bring it to committee. These are draft priorities for members to have an input if they feel there's something we need to include in there. So the first one is around ensuring a suitable supply of housing. I'm sure everybody's aware that since the development of the last housing strategy, house prices have continued to increase. I've put an example table there, and that was done for comparison based on how it was done in 2013. So that shows you some comparison. The supply of new homes does fall short of demand across North Yorkshire, but we do have to recognise that in Rydale, housing delivery does meet its targets. And it's important that we continue to do that. And I've highlighted at 6.13 our delivery against our targets in the local plan. Objective 2 is about increasing the supply of affordable housing, which obviously follows on. If house prices are increasing and wages are not following suit, then obviously the affordability of properties within our community gets more and more difficult for people. So we do meet our target. We have met our target over the last 5 years with an average of 80 homes every year against a target of 75, but we need to continue to maintain this. We know the issues that rural communities face. At 6.19, objective 3 is around preventing homelessness. We know that preventing homelessness is more cost effective than dealing with its consequences. We have developed our own homeless strategy that members will be aware of, that we did in 2020, and that will take us to 2025. And records have shown us that over the last 12 months, there has been an increase in households seeking assistance through housing options, with a 50% increase. At 6.23, I don't think I can do this without mentioning the impact of COVID and homelessness. The most significant intervention that the government brought out was everybody in. You'll be aware of first lockdown. We had to house everybody, whether they were priority need or not, and we housed an additional 31 households, and a lot of work was done within the team. We do face challenges over the next 6 months. There could be an increase on service requirement as landlords and housing providers can now recover debt and apply for evictions through the court. And in preparation for this, the team's working hard with partners to ensure residents engage with services as soon as possible. Objective 4 is about meeting housing needs, including those of vulnerable people. We have a statutory duty to assess the housing needs of our community and put services in place to meet these. We all know that a lack of suitable accommodation can significantly affect the support, care and treatment of a vulnerable person. So we continue to work actively with partner agencies on their strategies focusing on the vulnerable client group. Objective 5, about improving the quality and the standard of our homes. We know that innovative management to maintain and improve the quality of our stock in all tenures is fundamental, and the private sector is fundamental in this. We need to make for licensing of private sector housing. We know poor housing conditions have a detrimental effect in health, and social housing sector needs to be improved. We do have a private sector department, and we're doing a lot of work at the moment on improving the private rented sector and energy efficiency with it. And I think we need, as Councillor Clark has said, we will be bringing a report about the White Rose Home Improvement Agency so members have a better understanding of the work that does. Financial implications, when we look at that, there isn't currently any financial implications. All of the provision is done within the revenue budget, but we do get a lot of external funding, notably from MHCLG. We have continued to get that, I would say, for the last 20 years, but it's every year you get told how much you get, so there is always the risk that that could change at any time. The provision of any capital borrowing for housing projects would return to members for authorisation on a scheme-by-scheme basis. There's no legal implications. And then with the implications around climate change, we do know that tackling climate change in housing saves residents money, helps combat fuel poverty and boosts the economy and creates jobs. The council, and especially our partner housing association, wants to be at the forefront of this. But obviously they're facing huge challenges of how to cut carbon emissions, tackle climate change while delivering a major programme of safety remedial work and building tens of thousands of homes. But it is our intention, where we are the delivery arm, that we will undertake a climate change carbon assessment on all council schemes to ensure where possible we are developing to the highest environmental standards. Equality and diversity, we have completed full equalities impact assessment in respect of the strategy. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions from anybody? Well, if that's the case, I'm just going to make a couple of comments then. I started off at the end, Kim, and went down the achievements through the housing strategy 2015-21. And you notice from bullet point 17, no, don't bother to count. It's me just saying, please can we put numbering on things, because it's very difficult to chase that lot down. And I spent ages, I suspect we all do, counting down bullet points. Every one of them got a tick against it. And I just went tick, 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 tick. I then looked at the rest of the report. So I went to it with the philosophy, if the delivery on this programme is as good as the delivery as what we've had so far, absolutely over the moon with it. I have, so as to, not a criticism, but I have a comment to make, and I'm all in favour of you, how shall I put it, telling the rest of the world what they need to do as well. But if you look at page 41, and I don't need to read them out, but I've got it about 6 times on that page, I've written in the margin, local plan. So by definition, those on the local plan working party need to look at that page so that they can deliver what is needed in our housing strategy, because some of that page, it's all spot on stuff, but it would be very difficult for housing just to deliver it on its own, and it needs the plan for Rydale behind that to make it deliverable. And I'm sorry there weren't any questions in that. You probably had them before from me, Kim. But no, absolutely superb report, absolutely brilliant. And I move that it goes to P&R, because it goes to full council, or do we adopt it? It goes to full council. So we propose to full council, we recommend it to full council. Oh, you weren't quick enough, Di. Seconding, yes? Oh, I was voting already. Yeah, right. Those in favour?
Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Right. Review of the provision of 3 hours free car parking following the members' motion in April 2021. This, I presume, is Philip.
It is, Chair. Yes, good evening. Thank you.
Good evening, Philip.
Hi, just checking that everyone can hear before I start. Yeah, great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so basically the purpose of this report is to set out the issues and implications around introducing free 3-hour car parking in RDC car parks. And the recommendation in the report is to seek a member decision on whether to introduce free 3-hour car parking on the 31st of May, this being an interim position prior to further consideration of the issue by full council on the 24th of June, with that decision to take into account a number of factors set out within the report and summarised within the recommendation. I think this is a fairly well-travelled item. It has been discussed in principle by members, obviously on previous occasions, clearly discussed at last week's full council, and the context and basis for this particular report is the decision of full council on the 15th of April to introduce free 3-hour parking as soon as possible. What the report does is set out the issues, implications around the introduction of that measure. It talks about a number of operational issues, including, perhaps to highlight to members, practical issues around the reprogramming of car park ticket machines. There is a lead-in time that goes with that reprogramming, hence the fact that regrettably we've not been able to introduce the measure prior to this evening's meeting. The report also sets out other issues and implications around this particular item. Enforcement matters, communications issues, obviously financial matters need careful consideration, issues around customer perspectives and views and so on and so forth. And the report also makes recommendations to associated issues around the car parking permit scheme run currently by the council. So in summary, the recommendation is, as I say, to seek members' views and a steer from members on whether to introduce free 3-hour car parking as of the 31st of May, pending further consideration at the full council meeting in June. So fairly brief introduction, Chair, but I'll probably leave it there. And again, very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Philip. Anybody got any questions for Philip? Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Philip, thank you very much for that. On point 7.1a, the financial implications, it gives an estimated potential loss of 187,000. Do we have any data on how much of that will potentially come from Rydale residents and how much will come from those outside of Rydale? Philip, I know it's probably putting you on the spot, but I don't know if we have a very rough number that you could assist us with. Thank you, Philip.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Delaney. This question, I think, has been raised previously. Unfortunately, no, we don't have any data that actually splits residents against visitors. Unfortunately, we don't have that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Philip.
Any other questions anywhere? Getting gloomy in here, but I can't see any hands waving. Right. Who would like to open the debate? Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was initially very supportive, I think, as a lot of people were on this council, of the 3 hours when we first talked about it. I thought at the time businesses and residents in Rydale needed that support. I think times have changed now, and sadly we've probably missed the boat on this when we needed to target that quite specifically at the time. Obviously we're coming into summer, the economy's reopening. I think, as it indicates, I think 4.2, I think on there, that there's been no or little evidence to suggest that it's deterred people from returning to our market towns since the car parking charge have been reintroduced. So I think there was various members of this committee that were on the car parking working strategy. I think Councillor Keel, Councillor Frank, myself, Councillor Duncan. I think for me, we need to look at the results from there and focus on a long-term solution and a long-term strategy that's obviously going to help the residents of Rydale. That £187,000, the reason I was asking is obviously quite a significant amount of money to the council when our finances have been battered. And, you know, there are other things, other debates we've had in the past about, let's say, should we say, council tax rises and how that's going to impact the finances of Rydale residents. But obviously, in my opinion, a significant amount of that money is going to come from residents outside of Rydale. So I think that at a time when the council has suffered, you know, its finances, the £187,000 could potentially be spent on other priorities for the council. So, yeah, I think we had, you know, we did it at the time when it was needed, and I think it was done with good intentions, with a lot of cross-party support. But I don't feel now that it's the best use of council resources to implement the 3 hours. I think we should look at the findings of the working party and come together to present a long-term strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be very clear, that myself personally and the Conservative group as a whole, we do support free car parking in principle. Obviously, the details of that and how that happens and The amount of free car parking and where is all up for debate and discussion, and I don't think we can do that within a committee. We put forward that request for the free 3-hour car parking at the full council meeting before the last full council in good faith, because we felt that the way in which the car parking charges have been reintroduced was not in the spirit of the way in which things had changed. Circumstances had changed. The lockdown that we'd just come out of, businesses were reopening, and the communication, I don't feel, was as good as it could have been with residents. And there was lots of confusion around that, and I didn't think it was the right thing for us to be doing as a council, from a PR perspective, to be reintroducing the car parking charges at the time. And I believe that what should have happened is consultation with group leaders, a discussion around that, to allow that 3 hours to continue until there could have been a democratic decision taken as to what to do, given the changing circumstances from when full council had decided to implement that. So we put forward the motion at the full council meeting before last in good faith, which was that we wanted that 3 hours to be reintroduced. Unfortunately, to my frustration, I think many other members of other political groups as well, to their frustration, that has not happened. And obviously we've heard a series of explanations / excuses as to why that hasn't happened. I'm incredibly disappointed that it hasn't happened. However, we're now in a situation where, in effect, the car parking charges are reintroduced. They've stayed in place, and what we had decided as a council has not been implemented. So the question is, what do we now do? In my view, I don't think it is now right to give this contradictory message of reintroducing this free car parking offer. However, I do believe that we need to ensure as quickly as possible that we follow the strategy which we had agreed from the working party through PNR to council, unanimously or almost unanimously. And theme 6 of that strategy just state very clearly they strongly felt that there should be an element of free car parking available in all market towns all year round. This will bring Helmsley, Pickering and Kirby Moorside in line with Malton and Norton, where free car parking is already available. I believe that we have that within our strategy. That is what should be implemented. We should be encouraging the officers to begin implementing that as soon as possible. That's what we'd like to see as a Conservative group, is in effect a permanent long-term strategy regarding free car parking, because we do see the value of that to businesses, to residents, and we'd like to see that happen as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really going to say what the other two have said, really. I think this should be chucked in the bin and dumped. I think it'd be an absolute waste of time to just try and do a month, if that, of free car parking. The public would be so confused they won't know where they are. If we bring car parking back again after a month, we'll be just look as daft as we've been in the past. So I think it's really important that we do implement our car parking strategy, which we've all agreed with, as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm moving around to the idea that it's a good idea. We should be moving forward on the car park strategy, but I know I've missed the opportunity to ask questions of Philip, but I am on the car park strategy working party, and I think we got so far with it, but I don't think the detail had been worked out on the different towns. Certainly, I don't recall seeing the detail. I may have missed it, I hope not, but I think there was some work that still needed to be done, and I suppose if we are going to go down this route and just work on the car park strategy, which does make sense, we need to see that detail.
Can I bend the rules before I come to Councillor Frank and ask Philip if he would mind answering a question from Councillor Keel?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. It's a very simple answer, Councillor Keel. That detail has not been worked through yet, so I'm hearing clearly the message from members this evening that we need to get on with that as soon as possible, but that detail is not available at this moment in time.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Philip.
Janet.
Yeah, I thought about this, and really my suggestion would be to leave car parking charges as they are. I think they're in line with our neighbouring councils, and therefore visitors coming to the area expect to pay that price. And they're not deterred by it because it's same everywhere, and if you go somewhere you expect to pay for parking. If you want to support our local people, you could make the parking discs that we buy, say £10 or £20 for administration costs, and anybody with a Rydale address could have a parking disc for 20 quid or something, and for a year for 20 quid. If you want to support your local people, and that way revenue wouldn't be lost and local people would be happy. I think to lose £187,000 is way too much for this council to lose, and there is all sorts of jobs that need to be done in our market towns to help our market towns, and if you want to help the businesses in the market towns, you could give them a grant from this 187,000 that you're going to lose. Surely there's a lot of shop fronts could do with a good lick of paint and a good smarten up, and if we could give a grant of 200 or 250 quid to them for that purpose, I'm sure that would be better use of our finances, and it would help the local people, and it would help the local businesses, and it would help the tourists. If we smartened our towns up and we had all nice smart towns, it would be better for tourism as well, and better for our businesses. And final point I have to make is every toilet in every market town in Rydale needs refurbishing. They're all to say they're actually a health risk, some of those toilets. So, I mean, I'll put it bluntly, they are a health risk. And some of this money could be used for that, and that would help our towns, it would help our local people, it would help the tourism, blah, blah, blah.
Could I just agree with some of what Councillor Frank has said? I think it would be, we've encouraged people from the villages, again, to shop local, come to the market towns throughout the pandemic and stay local. And I do think there's an element that we need to encourage that, and we should look at some sort of free parking for villagers to come into the market towns, whether it be a disc or whatever. I'm not sure a coat of paint on the window fronts is going to change that, but I certainly think we should spend it on, looking at villagers getting some rewards for using the towns.
Anybody else? I'll just give a couple of comments on this. I've got to declare an interest. We do have a seasoned car parking disc. And I'm not sure whether I'd be encouraged to go into Pickering or Kirby or wherever any more frequently if that was £20 as opposed to about 38 now, I think. But that's the right principle to be on, because it is ludicrous having people coming into Rydale on holiday with money in their pocket to spend and not charging them for it. But you've got to balance that with charging local people for it. And so I've always been in favour of the parking disc, and you could reduce them a little more. They're not dear now, they're 75 pence a week or whatever, and you're limited on the 2 hours parking, but it's the same. Can I just cover one thing? When we had full council, I can't remember whether we voted against or abstained in large numbers about us making the decision tonight. Yet everybody tonight has hinted at or gone round the circuit of we can't swap backhand or whatever. The decision to charge on the 1st of April was made by full council, not P&R. And when that was put in place, the public seemed fine, but councillors, some of which seemed most unhappy with it. The earliest we could have got the free charging in place because it's subcontracted out, and it's at the time of year where every council in the country is changing, was the 24th of May. So we could have removed car parking charges on the 24th of May and left them there until the date in June of full council. I took it on the chin and are quite happy to say, I said, please don't do that. When's the next date? And they said the 31st of May. That's good. If we can get P&R to have the deciding right, we can stop this. And we would have been charging, non-charging, or tonight we would have been saying what everybody said so far. We don't think you should have charges for car parking. Or we do think you should have charges. We think you should be charging. When out there, we weren't charging. And we couldn't do anything about it until it got to full council. So I've tried to steer it through, but it really does need a little bit of thought. And somebody said about, putting the plan in place, and I couldn't, the strategy in place, and I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely vital that we get. But we've had this, it seems like a good idea, and we had it without officers' paperwork. It went to full council without any officer's report. Now, that's fine on occasions, but it is a dangerous practice, and it has resulted in this in-out game. Councillor Duncan, you have spoken once, but I'm more than happy for you to bat again.
I just wanted to say one thing, which was throughout the handling of the COVID pandemic, the officers, myself, who was obviously working very closely with them for most of that period of time, one of the key elements of everything we did was flexibility and responding quickly. And that requires responding to very different circumstances, sometimes in the same day, maybe the same week, maybe the same month, where things were changing all the time, things opening up, things shutting down. And yes, council made a decision back in December that it wanted to offer 3 months of free car parking. Obviously, Councillor Keir was involved in that, myself as well, and we got to that conclusion. And we had envisaged, and others have twisted my words on this, but we had envisaged that businesses will be open, that they'll be open for business, and that we'll be supporting them through those 3 months when they were likely to be struggling, that we wanted to keep that free car parking offer. We did not know at that time, and nobody could know, that we would be into another lockdown situation for that length of time. And when it came to the 31st of March, there should have been some flexibility and some discretion shown, and yourself, Councillor Clark, I know you're very new to the role at that time, could have enabled that to happen in consultation with officers and in consultation with group leaders, so that we didn't have a press release that was issued from a spokesperson for Rydal District Council saying, now is the right time to reintroduce car parking charges. Because what may have been the decision taken back in December by full council, certainly full council did not say and never said, now is the right time to reintroduce car parking charges. That was wrong and should not have happened and was handled very badly. We responded to that as a Conservative group, and the majority of council supported it, was to say that we should now try and have a seamless transfer where we have and continue that free offer to be in place. That did not happen. And I don't want to go back over the reasons as to why. I make an argument, I spoke to Philip directly about this, that something could have been done sooner than the time frame that you have outlined. That didn't happen. We're now at this stage tonight. I'm very disappointed. Other members of other groups are also disappointed. And we're accepting that that couldn't happen, it didn't happen. What do we do now moving forward? And we're saying that we have a strategy, we should stick by the strategy, we want to see it implemented as soon as possible. We said that with the free car parking offer, and 6 weeks on, nothing's happened with it. We genuinely want to see this happen. We want to see it happen quickly so that residents are clear and we're clear, and we're doing what we can in perhaps the last 12 months we've got as a council to make an impact for local residents. So we have a strategy in place, we want to see it implemented, and we stand by everything that we did throughout this because we felt that free car parking would have been beneficial. It didn't happen, and we're disappointed about that.
Councillor Andrews?
Thank you. The free car parking for the first 3 months, or well, 4 months, I think, from December to the end of March was fantastic. We were all fully supportive of it. The council made that decision. If I'd have been sort of new to the role of P&R, I wouldn't have assumed to get people's I mean, you've got a lot of experience, Councillor Duncan, on working closely with the officers, and you know how the inner sanctum, if you like, of the council works. But the council made a decision, and from a councillor's point of view, that isn't in and hasn't had dealings with officers to the extent that you have. The council made that decision. The public knew that that's what was happening for those 4 months, and the businesses knew. What was going on within the council, behind the scenes, or indeed on Zoom meetings in public, wasn't. I would have felt it would be very presumptuous of Councillor Clark to think, oh, we're going to extend this because circumstances have changed. And we actually did put a thing in that was at the meeting, a motion to an amendment to say we look at this again in February, and nobody wanted to look at it in February. In February, that could have then, well, actually, if it's working well, we could extend that. That was taken out of the picture, so we assumed that that's what was happening, and the car park charges went back on April the 1st, and there were some residents that were most put out about it, and there was others that said, actually, I knew about it, I just forgot the date, I've taken it on the chin. And yes, the second lockdown did come, but it wasn't, I don't think, up to a councillor to presume that that's how we should go with it. So I keep going back over this all the time. It happened. It's done with, and moving on. I'm glad we got this officer's report just to see how much money we were going to lose if we did do this. And it would have been nice, and it would have been great to be able to give them, another 2-3 months, or even, I mean, it was suggested the whole summer. But when you go around Rydale, which, as I have, the car parks are full. People are I had to queue. There was 10 people in front of me in Helmsley the other day waiting to put their money in the machine. And so I think possibly the timing was right to start charging. And I'm just glad that I think we're all going on the same direction on this, and it's not about a political thing. I think I agree with Councillor Delaney. We need to get the parking strategy in place as soon as possible to support the businesses, to help local people, but also to maintain and protect the revenue coming into this council. Thank you.
Same again. Once you weaken and somebody have a second bat, all sorts of people come back for another bat.
I'm very quick, John. I won't be long-winded.
No, I know that.
I just wondered if there was any chance of getting a car parking strategy meeting so that they can cross the T's and dot the I's and get the strategy finished and worked up, and then we can
all the
go on to
working
this
parties
strategy.
will need to be looking at when they meet and whatever.
Well, let's crack
car
on with it,
parking,
and then strategy can be implemented.
Yeah. There's only one thing there that I'm not going to leave unresponded to. I'm endeavouring to carry out the wishes and the decisions of full council. I am not seeing it, Chair of P&R, as a dictatorship of an empire, that I will make decisions that I think are right on the hunch. And if I don't understand that, maybe it's a good thing, because I actually think full council should make the decisions. If you are in a crisis, it's no good shaking your head, Councillor Duncan. I didn't shake my head. Oh, jolly good. That's nice to hear. I can't quite see you in this gloom, but I'm glad to know you're shaking your head. If full council decides something, then it's got to be fairly heavy before I will reverse that, and there's got to be a pretty heavy crisis, even if I have the power to reverse that. And council has decided decided not to review it in February, but it knew what was going to be happening at the end of March. Council decided that it was going to put in free car parking without the officers putting in the numbers and a report. That's up to council if it wants to do that. But then you can't blame anybody other than yourself when you go down that route if it then goes wrong. So on that basis, I'm sure it's my naivety and newness to the role, and I've got a bit of nodding there, but quite bluntly, I'm not going to suddenly start going round dictating unless we have an absolute crisis of a fire or 6 feet of water somewhere, whatever else. That's not my style. Right, can we move on, please? What have we got to do on this one? Can I move that we leave the car parking charges as they are? Yeah. You're slowing down. You haven't been on the Councillor Arnold training session. Oh, right, next week, is it? Good. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you, Philip.
Sorry, Chair, I seem to have missed someone off the vote there.
Or less people than we should have.
I've got one less people than I should have.
One less people. Do we do it again?
Yes, please,
Those in
Chair.
favour? That's roughly, no, shut up, John.
I've got it now, Chair, so that's 6 votes for and 3 abstentions.
I'm going to keep going. Can we have those against, please? Just in case somebody's been double counted or half counted. Those against? Abstentions? Yeah, sorry. I said I'd take the vote again. I'm going to take all of it rather than get halfway through. And
Thank you, Chair.
up. Right, are we happy now? Can I have the result, please?
Yes, Chair, 6 votes for, 3 abstentions.
6 votes for and 3 abstentions. Thank you all, and thank you for Philip. We now move on to development opportunities in the 3-year housing development programme acquisition for shared housing.
Sorry, Chair, I think there's a vote on it going into exempt session before then.
Sorry.
And we could take the urgent
yes,
business
I need
as
to move
well.
that. Thank you, well spotted. Can I move exempt? But no, we need to move on to the urgent item first. Sorry. I have got today, the same as everybody else has got today, the consultation from DEFRA. And skipping it over it for half an hour, and I apologise to those of you who didn't get a whole half hour to skip over it, it doesn't look, no, it does look so relevant, or chunks of it are relevant to Rydale Council, the climate, the planet, the lot, that it would be wrong for us not to have a view on it. But we then have the date for the review. The date for the information to go in is the 4th of June. So on that basis, I am proposing that if anybody's spotted anything in their skim through that they'd like to raise and discuss tonight, we can. But I am suggesting that the whole of those 3 consultations, if anybody has anything where they disagree with the officer's recommendation, that we do. Now, I'm going to ask Becky to come in a minute, but I'm looking at the way we handle it first. Are we all happy with that? Because I don't see it. I hope this is an indication of how happy you are, Councillor Duncan, but let's see.
There's still some unanswered questions about this, and I just want to know, and a very simple answer, which is, when did you personally become aware that the government had launched a consultation on these 3 items? You as an individual, when did you become aware that there was a consultation ongoing on these 3 items?
I didn't know exactly what it was, but I became aware that things were happening in relation to recycling and garden waste and all sorts of things which aren't in these consultations. I became aware of that on Monday, 2:30, 3 o'clock, somewhere there. I didn't become aware of all the consultations and what they were about until yesterday at some point. I didn't make a note of when. And I then raised the question, and we checked out with officers as to what was happening and what could happen and what didn't. And then I asked for the links to be sent to you yesterday. Now, that skipped a beat, I think, in between me asking for... Did you get the links yesterday? I think you got the links yesterday, yes. So that was sort of, within hours of when I'd found out what the links were, because I thought it was consultation, and if you look at the paperwork, you will see that there is a consultation that runs to the 4th of July. And that is what I thought that I'd come across on, let me go for it again, that I'd come across on Monday afternoon. So that, we need to do something. We need to do something fairly quick, but it isn't by tea time. When I came across, I was told, and I can't remember which way round it was, I think I asked somebody to look on the website, as to what consultations there were. They said a handful of them. And one of them's got to be in by the 10th. They didn't even spot the 4th of June. Same sort of rush. They were at work, I was at work, whatever else, and somebody just looked it up. And that got this urgency tonight, but I didn't get that until a day or so after. So I got that on Tuesday, Wednesday, late on in the day, that there was a bucket full of consultations, etc. But I was under the belief that it was wrongly. Well, no, not wrongly, because the one they were discussing about was recycling, and all the stuff that's in the point 4 there was all for the 4th of July. And then I realised that there was these consultations going on at the same time.
So you became aware of it, and then you insisted that it be on the agenda as an urgent item for this meeting.
When I became aware that it wasn't on, when it wasn't on here, and we could get a report together and gather the response was going on. Right. I don't know when the officers started on the response, and I'm not going to grill the officers to find out. I am responsible for it being here late. I have put on to the forward plan that we have on every meeting government consultations. And then with a little bit of luck, there is a system there to pick up these on time. Because not many consultations last for less than the time between one P&R meeting and the next. It'd be unusual, not impossible, but unusual. So when the government does a consultation on housing, planning, waste recycling, renewable energy on public buildings, whatever, then it will be a standing item, as far as I'm concerned, on the committee. And then we'll decide, no, we don't want to respond to that, or yes, we have, and here's the draft response from the officers. And I apologise for it being late, but my alternative was to not do it at all, which I thought was totally inappropriate. Just pretend it hadn't happened and we didn't need to. Councillor Andrews.
So are you looking for us to look at this, and if there's something we strongly disagree with, bring it up with...
If you know of anything now and you want to discuss it now, fine. Otherwise, you'll have to feed it in, and I'm going to ask Becky to come in a minute. This debate's got away on me, Becky. we need to bring it to me or to Becky to say, I'm concerned about this one, you're saying yes to a question and I think it should be no. And then if Becky gets a handful of people saying it should be yes and no, then Becky will consult with me and we'll see what we can do to get it in there. We cannot go through that lot tonight. But if anybody's got anything saying, oh, this is a disaster, this one, and have you seen that? Please say it so it points everybody else in that direction. But we're not going to debate them all tonight. We're not even going to, as far as I'm concerned, unless you've all brought your sleeping bags with you and I haven't got mine, I don't think there's any point in us even thinking about that. But we'll have to look at how we do the next one, because that is only a month away. Right, are we all happy with that approach? I don't think we have any choices myself, but, you know. Right, Becky, would you like to take us through what you've got in responses to the first three, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just check that everyone can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to start by apologising to the committee that these consultations were not on the forward plan for the Policy and Resources Committee. The report tonight provides an update on a series of fundamental changes to waste policies which DEFRA is currently consulting on. These are very comprehensive consultation documents, and it is appreciated that the time elected members this committee for reading has been extremely limited, if indeed impossible. I will firstly set the scene to provide background to the committee on the government strategy on resources and waste, and if it is agreeable to Chair, what I would then like to do is go on to outline the headline policy proposals for each of the consultations.
Can I imply, and I don't wish to be rude, are we all wanting to go into it at all? Because if we are, yes, please, Becky, and if we aren't, can we move on? I'm getting a lot of shaking of heads, Becky, and as I said, I will carry that on the chin. You can take it as me being rude. Can you give us a brief outline of, rather than too much on it, because members haven't read it, couldn't read it, didn't get it in time to read it. What you've produced here and what you've done is spot on, but the timing's gone out, so the feedback from members and the feedback from you to members, etc., is going to have to take place over the next 2 or 3 days. Can't do it tonight, I don't think. Is that me being too rude, Becky? And if it is, throw something at me, please.
No, it's not being rude at all, Chair. What I was hoping to do, because there is a lot of reading, is to pick out the salient points.
Yes, sorry, I misunderstood you. Carry on, keep picking.
To Friday, so it's just sort of being clear about what we do need to be thinking about rather than everything.
Go on.
So, just to give the background to start with then, so going back to December 2018, DEFRA published a new resources and waste strategy, and following that in the spring of 2019 a series of initial consultations took place, and we were expecting in the waste industry for subsequent consultations to take place early 2020, and these have been delayed. Despite the delays to the consultations, the proposed implementation date remains a challenging timeframe, with the changes proposed starting still from 2023, which is, as you know, the proposed date of the local government reform, which does represent unprecedented challenges for waste and recycling services. The deadline for submission is extremely tight given the extent of the proposed changes, and there's also been an added challenge of a 5-week gap between the launch of the first 3 consultations and then the 4th consultation, which has the most impact for collection authorities and local authorities, and the limited time available then to consider the impacts of each proposal on each other. These consultations are open to a range of stakeholders, including local authorities, residents and businesses, and there is not a requirement to answer all questions. As you would expect, wherever possible, the answers to the questions that I've drafted have been given from a Ryedale District Council perspective to ensure that our residents and businesses continue to receive the most efficient and effective waste and recycling services. The Council is also a member of the Local Authority Recycling Audit Committee, known as LARAC, and some of the proposed draft answers do include reference to the views of local authorities collectively to give context to specific areas which LARAC is much better placed to do. There are also some questions which cannot be answered or are currently unsure about a response due to the lack of detail. The proposals are comprehensive and complex, and more work will be done by officers on the details and the potential impacts the new legislation potential to have on the Council's waste and recycling services. And whilst the consultations do propose a series of significant changes and challenging timescales to be phased in from 2023 right through to 2030, in principle, many of the reforms affecting waste are to be welcomed. This is because of the positive contribution they will make to the overall goal of the resources and waste strategy, which is to maximise the value of the resources we use, minimise the waste we create, cut emissions and help create a greener, cleaner and healthier planet. These consultations focus on solutions that reduce reliance on single-use plastics, cut confusion over household recycling and tackle the problem of packaging. There are no financial implications directly related to this report and current consultations. However, as I said earlier, further detailed work is required to evaluate the financial impacts of the proposed new legislation. So to summarise the consultations, there's two consultations, the extended producer responsibility and the introduction of a deposit return scheme, and they both have a deadline submission of the 4th of June, which is next Friday. So extended producer responsibility, known as EPR, is aimed at producers and reforms to packaging targets for 6 packaging materials, which are plastic, card, steel, aluminium, glass and wood. And with this proposal, a new financial regime where producers will pay the full net costs of dealing with the waste they produce is proposed from October 23, with the aim to incentivise producers to question the use of their packaging, or to reduce it, or stop using it completely, or introduce packaging which can be recycled. And fees will be informed by the recyclability of packaging, whether the infrastructure is in place. And what that means is that there are nationwide collection and sorting systems. And these proposals aim to drive up the recycling rate of packaging to 78% by 2030, which in turn will generate 4.4 million tonnes of carbon benefits. And this is a fundamental shift of financial responsibility from local authorities to producers. As elected members will be aware, that there is a current payment system called recycling credits, where Ryedale currently receives £480,000 a year in revenue from all the materials we recycle. And this is expected to be replaced with payments to local authorities to actually include the cost of collecting packaging waste from the residual waste stream, and those who operate efficient and effective collection systems for recycled packaging. And the new payment regime is actually expected to outweigh the current credits being received. However, further clarity on the new funding regime is needed. So just to summarise, the other proposals included in the documentation are the introduction of recycling of plastic film and flexible packaging by the end of 26-27. Introducing further recycling materials is welcomed, however, it is totally reliant on there being the infrastructure in place to deal with this, which there is not currently, and how this will be collected, needs to be considered further. Clearer labelling on products is also another proposal, so that businesses and residents can make the right recycling decision on what can and cannot be recycled, to reduce confusion and make it easy for everyone to do the right thing. Producers will also be made responsible for common littered packaging, such as fast food and single-use cups. Sellers of filled single-use cups will be expected to provide take-back facilities and ensure the cups are recycled. And there is a strong incentive on producers to seek to prevent littering, or where this is not possible, ensure it is effectively managed through litter bins and street cleansing. And the scheme would be administered by a governing body being referred to as a scheme administrator. And the draft responses that you have to look at after the meeting, the next week, in the main support the consultation proposals. Moving to the deposit return scheme proposal, this is where a scheme will be introduced for drinks containers from 2024, where consumers would pay an upfront deposit and then return the containers to retailers to reclaim their deposit. And the aim is to increase recycling rates to 90% collection rate after 3 years of implementation. And also this would move us towards a circular economy and to reduce litter. And what is being consulted on is which materials would be in scope. So this would include plastic bottles, but not milk containers, because they're made of different plastics, steel and aluminium cans and glass bottles. The consultation is also looking at the size of the containers and whether it would be an on-the-go scheme, which would be containers of 750 millilitres or less, or an all-in scheme, where all drinks containers consumed on the go and in the home up to 3 litres would be returnable. The method that is being produced is that retailers with in-scope containers would be obligated to host a reverse vending machine. And producers will increase the price of their product by the amount of the deposit. And then the deposit would be returned to the consumer when the empty container is placed in the reverse vending machine. Labelling would prevent a container being scanned twice, and so consumers would know which containers are in scope and which containers are not. And the amount of the proposed deposit ranges from a minimum of 10p to a maximum of 50p. Again, a governing body referred to as a deposit management organisation will be established, which would be funded by material revenue, producer registration fees and unredeemed deposits. Local authorities would be reimbursed through the extended producer responsibility to cover the cost of collection and recycling of the in-scope containers placed in curbside recycling. If the containers could be separated, there is also the possibility for local authorities to claim back the deposit. There are a number of concerns with the current proposals, which I will summarise. It has the potential to divert high-quality recyclable materials away from the established curbside recycling scheme. It is not clear whether councils will be compensated for loss of material income. We currently sell the materials for an income. Redesigning curbside collections, re-optimising rounds for consistent collections and extended producer responsibility are all pieces of work, and implementing a deposit return scheme at the same time adds another complication. It is also going to be difficult to design collection regimes not knowing what effect the deposit return scheme will have on the amounts of materials we currently collect at the curbside. And the modelling is based on pre-COVID consumer behaviour, which does need to be updated to reflect more online shopping and less travel to work. The proposal also places extra burdens on businesses and producers when many businesses are struggling from the COVID lockdowns. When consumers forego the deposit and place in curbside recycling, the unredeemed deposits will be claimed by the deposit management organisation. And currently trials are being run on having a digital scheme, but the outcome of these trials is still not known. On a practical level, there will be additional storage issues for residents if an all-in scheme is implemented, because residents would need to store another stream of materials at home if they want to reclaim their deposit, because they wouldn't be able to put everything in the curbside recycling box as they currently do now. They'd have to separate it further. And for lower income families, the elderly and infirm, without their own transport, they may actually struggle to return the materials and therefore forgoing their deposit, which would actually result in them paying higher prices at the checkout. And the term that is being used is bin diving, which is where this scheme could encourage people to search curbside boxes for containers where there was still a deposit to redeem. So based on all those concerns, the draft response does not support the proposal. Instead, it supports the deferral until the extended producer responsibility and the consistency of collections have been embedded, and there is more data on which to inform a DRS scheme. It is also considered that practically the changes being proposed actually represent too much change all at once, which would be confusing for residents and businesses, and taking a step change approach will secure the benefits of the changes and ensure there is good awareness of what is happening and the reasons why, to encourage participation and behaviour change. I think the post-COVID issue is important too, in that the scheme is not designed around post-COVID behaviour, and I think the trials that are currently running need to inform the scheme that is implemented. And the consultation is actually asking for a preference on either on the go or an all-in, and the draft proposal supports the on the go scheme to target the recycling not currently captured through existing curbside collections, which would be less disruptive to this existing system and would seek to reduce littering. The final and third consultation, which is proposing an updated waste prevention programme, the deadline is a week later on the 10th of June. And the waste and resources strategy is framed by natural capital thinking and guided by two overarching objectives, which is to maximise the value of resource use and to minimise waste and its impact on the environment. And the revised waste prevention programme will help deliver these in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduce the pressure on our natural environment, help safeguard our resource security, increase growth in new sectors, enhance competitiveness by keeping products and materials in circulation, and create jobs at all skills levels. Potential of the revised waste prevention programme include transforming product design and supporting factors such as spare part provision, making it easy for consumers to make sustainable purchasing decisions, using the extended producer responsibility and other financial incentives to ensure the polluter pays principle is embedded, and aligning the regulatory framework with a circular economy approach. And the draft response strongly agrees with the impacts and outcomes and recognises the waste prevention programme is a start, but there probably is a need for a better plan around tackling waste minimisation and resource efficiency to change consumer behaviour. I am nearly at the end of my outline. So just to summarise, the draft responses also do agree with designing out, reducing, reusing and repairing waste, reducing litter and improving data and information. And the report, the recommendation, or the report at point 4 does also alert elected members to the consistency in collections consultation, which is running. Now that consultation has not been running for as long as the other three. It was launched the day after the election, and the deadline for that is the 4th of July. And this is the most significant consultation affecting us, and part 1 is aimed at local authorities. And we do need to complete more detailed work on the implications for RIDO, and a further report will be presented to this committee. I do appreciate that I've just covered 380 pages of consultation in less than half an hour, and hope that the summarising of the key issues is helpful. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions any elected members may have. Thank you.
Claire.
Yeah, Becky, can I just ask, in your opinion, what do you think of what you've read and what you've seen, and do you think it's an improvement, or do you think it's just going to be a nightmare?
I think the extended producer responsibilities in horses change, recycling, and the deposit return is happening in an area that the existing action scheme, and I think it's something that we plan to do. So we have embedded the extended producer responsibility and, importantly, the consistency in collections as a chance to embed as well, and they are where the changes need to work together on, so you fully understand what the implications of that would be for council. And the responses that I've produced reflect that.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that.
Any other questions from anybody? Thank you, Becky. I think you're going to have to learn to do 500 pages in 25 minutes if you're going to get anywhere up to speed. That was a lot of stuff done in a very short period of time. And I hope members of the committee come to you with comments between now and 3rd of June at the latest, I would have thought, for the first two, and the 9th of June for the other one. The fourth one, and thank you for not going into that at all, the fourth one is the one that will affect councils directly, and I think that will have to come to P&R, but hopefully you will have a full week's notice and the paperwork with it, and it won't all be arriving in a great rush. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Anybody else got anything to say on that? And I move that. I think the easiest way is that comments in relation to the consultation are given to the officers, and it's agreed between the officers in consultation with the chair after receiving those comments. Is that too rambling for this time of night, or have we got the general gist of that?
I think that's in line with the officer recommendation, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, please. Oh, this is cruelty to. No, you don't understand. But anyway, if you're doing the training session next week with Councillor Arnold, you'll learn how to do it. Right, those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? No?
That's unanimous, Chair.
That'll do. Anybody needing a comfort break? Because if you are, let's... No, that's... Well, by a comfort break, I mean sort of 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be that... Doesn't have to be that quick. It doesn't have to be that slow and long either. Yeah, 5 minutes. And four if he's back earlier than that. Yes to what?
He said yes voluntarily.
Yes, please.
Could we pause the live stream, please?
Can I move exempt?
Can we start the live stream
Yeah.
just while we do exempt, and then we'll stop it when we move that?
Guess we should have done that before, shouldn't we? Yeah, good thinking. I move exempt, as in paragraph 10. I've actually given up now completely. Thank you, Joy, for seconding. Those in favour of going into exempt?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Fine. Thank you.
If we could stop the live stream for the rest of the meeting, please.